All right, guys, welcome to week 4. Budgets.
Hey.
Statistics. It's like the week that you get to realize that your whole life is all like a bar graph, right? The fun awesomeness of statistics is not just for baseball, it's for other things too. And you're going to use it for your restaurant, right? Yay! So exciting. I love numbers. I'm a numbers person. I love figuring out the numbers and doing the processes and like figuring out, oh, how can we do this to make it more efficient? I love doing all that type of stuff. And this is the type of stuff that's going to help you save money and make certain that your dream is actually going to stay a reality. Because, you know, you may have that delightful dream and know the tile that you want to pick out and all that great stuff. But if you don't have money to back it up and the know-how how to keep a hold of your money, you're not going to be able to stay in business for very long. And that is why our delightful and wonderful expert chef Jonathan is going to be doing this live session for you guys this week. Isn't that exciting? Go, Chef Jonathan.
I am super excited. This is one of my favorite subjects to talk about is budgeting. Before we get into that, though, I just wanted to talk about this last week's assignment real quick. Make sure you guys didn't have any questions, comments, concerns about it that we can address real quick. Overall, what I saw was really great. It seemed like a lot of people put in a ton of thought and energy into that schedule. That schedule is actually going to feed in really well to our discussion that we're going to have tonight. Some of the more common stumbling blocks that I saw, number one, missing that concept summary. That's really a bummer to hit you for points for that. It's very straightforward, very easy. We're actually going to get a break from that in week 4, but you're going to need it still in week 5 and 6, so don't lose it. Chef Greg?
Yeah, same thing. I saw a lot of great schedules. It looks like everybody's businesses is going to be stocked and ready to go. Just one stumbling block I saw was just remember that you're always going to be on salary and you're possibly a manager. It is okay to have an hourly manager. However, you wouldn't want them to go above that 40 hours. So if you have a manager that is hourly, you'd want them 40 or less. If you have a manager that is salary, you can schedule them over 40.
So do you guys have any questions for us before we kind of close the book on last week here?
I had one. Chef Jonathan, you graded mine. I'm not sure if you noticed that I had put on mine, there was a little comment that I added to mine. I talked with my bosses to help me with mine. And in Montana, the best way to go about this, and I'm not sure if this is true in most states, but being an owner, you could probably go with somewhat of a salary issue in getting biweekly, like let's say $1,000, but it's taxed heavily. And then maybe an owner something other, I'm not sure exactly the second part of that, be able to get like, let's say another $1,000 biweekly. Is that a way to go on about that? If that may, I'm not sure that extra word. It's a very big, long word. Did you understand what I was saying? I'm sorry.
So you bring up a really good point. If you put in an actual comment, I can't actually see it. But if you type it into the cell, I'll be able to see your comment.
Oh, okay. Sorry. I thought it would pop up that you could see it highlighted. Okay. Sorry.
That's okay. In terms of double dipping on pay, that's usually not so much encouraged, where you're taking a salary for a chef position and a salary for a owner position. There are ways to do it, but again, it's going to be really dependent on your local laws, because usually when you have two different job codes in the same organization, that really feeds into that overtime question. Because even if you're working two different jobs, you can't work 100 hours a week between those two jobs in the same building. So it's a little complicated.
I'm trying to say the word disbursement. I'm not sure. Does that sound even close to what familiar to you guys?
So, go ahead, Chef Greg.
No, go ahead, sir.
I think what you're talking about with the disbursement to the owner is if you're taking a regular salary for being a chef, and then you're also the owner, you might get a percentage of the profits that go to the owners and are split between whoever's owning it. That's a little bit different than drawing two salaries.
That's what I'm talking about. The word that you said.
Disbursement. Okay.
Yeah.
Chef Rachel, I'm sure, could have a little more insight into that one.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, you're good. It's a good question to have. And it's more like, you think of it more like a, like you're reimbursing like a third party. So you got to look at it like that. Like, you're not taking two salaries, you're reimbursing that person. So if they got something like, like a lawyer, you would do this for a lawyer, right? If you have, if you bring in a lawyer to do some work for you, you're going to give them the disbursements, which is the recharges, you're going to give those back to them for that time and that extra stuff that they spend. So look at it more like it's a third person and it's not all the time. So it's just during that time frame. Does that make sense? I'm still a little foggy, so if it doesn't it makes sense in my head, but it may not. Does that make sense to you guys? I'm seeing nods. Yes. Okay, cool. And Chef Jonathan, you're off.
Actually, funny you should say that. I was just going to pass it off to you to talk about the discussion forum this week, because we have one of those.
Oh, yay! I know, aren't you guys excited? We have a discussion. Yay! You excited? So remember, you guys are going to do your discussion. I'm going to send you a delightful, wonderful link. Do you guys enjoy my links? Did you like that last one I sent, the Star Wars one? Everybody like that one? See, it came. It worked, didn't it? You're not going to be like Luke. No, that's impossible. So remember, we'll have our discussion that will be due on Saturday and at 11:59 p.m. Central Standard Time. And then two peer responses will be due on Tuesday. And also look for those links in your email, in which I will talk about little key points about your discussion and things to consider and things not to consider. You will be getting that on Friday, tomorrow, to prepare you, think about what you want to say, have an awesome response. Great. You're going to love it, right? Yeah, chef, it's going to be awesome. Nobody? Anybody watch the Bob's Burgers? Bob's Burgers one, where he's like, so fresh, with the cranberries, throwing them up in the air. Nobody? It's all good. All right. So, I am good to go. Are you good to go, Chef Jonathan? All right. Then take it away.
All right. So guys, like we said, we're going to be talking about building a budget. Since you guys are used to me talking about the assignment and the assignment only, I do want to give you a heads up. We're going to be talking about the broader subject, and then at the end here, we're going to talk about the assignment specifically. So just bear with me here, but I'm going to share this with you. I also am going to put these slides up on the class page. So budgeting. When I say 30, 30, 30, 10, does that sound familiar to you guys? I know you've heard it before. Can anybody tell me what this is?
I think I can.
Go for it.
30% food cost, 30% labor, 30%. Is it overhead? And I know 10% is projected profits.
You got it. That was perfect. I'm so impressed. Yeah, as you said,
I learned it from you.
Yeah, 165. I was hoping that might ring a bell. So cost of goods sold is another. Food costs is actually going to fit underneath this cost of goods heading. So you want 30% for cost of goods. That's going to include everything you're selling, whatever you're spending to buy it before you sell it. So that could be your beverages. If you're going to sell t-shirts and cups and hats, that would be in cost of goods. Food, obviously, all your ingredients, that's your cost of goods sold. With labor cost, it's pretty much what it sounds like. How much are you going to pay your people? Both your salary and your hourly employees. Hopefully that's going to be that next 30%. The last 30% is operating costs. There's a lot of different names for this category. Could be miscellaneous, it could be other costs, it could be, some people call it overhead, but that's usually reserved for a little bit of a different category. So I would try to stick more with operating than overhead. And then finally, hopefully you're making 10% profit. So when you add these things up, that's 100%, right? What is that? What would that 100% be? What are these all pieces of?
Is it operational?
Budget.
Operation, budget, not quite. 100% is actually going to be your sales. So when you sell your product, you're going to be spending 30% of the money that you're getting from sales and putting it to paying back for the food that you bought. You're going to be spending 30% of those sales to pay your people to work for you. You're going to be spending 30% of that to pay for these operating costs, and hopefully you got that 10% profit. Remember, guys, this is just a guideline. Every business operates a little bit differently. Sometimes your food cost is going to be a little higher, but if your food cost is higher, you've got to balance that in your labor cost or your operating cost so that you can maintain that 30% between them. When they're all combined together, hopefully they add up to 90% of your sales. Do you guys have any questions about that? We're actually going to talk about each one of these categories in depth, but just right off the bat, do you guys have any questions? No? Good?
No.
All right. So moving on. Oh, one other quick thing. Most restaurants, as you might remember from 165, most restaurants that are operating at a profit are only making 3 to 5% profit. That's not unusual, not something to freak out about. This isn't ideal, but just something to keep in mind. So the first step is we need to figure out that middle piece, what that 100% is. Sales forecasting is trying to guess how much sales you're going to do for a week, for a day, for a year. That's sales forecasting in a nutshell. Not an easy thing, but we can kind of get in the general ballpark. One way to do that is to start by estimating how many covers in a day you're going to do. So I know you guys talked about covers in CE225. Can you tell me what I mean when I'm talking about a cover?
People sitting at the tables.
Perfect. How many people in a day you're going to be feeding. So a very, very ballpark number would be to take how many seats you have in your restaurant and multiply it by 1.5, and that'll give you roughly how many covers you're going to do at lunch, and then you'll do it again for dinner. You can find some different equations out there, find some different things to help you get a little closer, but this is just a really broad guess here. So next, you're going to take those covers in a day, and you're going to multiply that by your average sale. In week 1, you took a stab at coming up with your average ticket price on that concept summary. So you'll just multiply covers by that, and that gives you your revenue for the day. Revenue is the same thing as sales. It's they're used interchangeably, but most of the times they're not. People aren't going to say both in the same sentence. So it's really good to keep that kind of in your mind, that revenue and sales pretty much mean the same thing. Remember, it's just an estimate, and before you open your business is when these estimates are going to be the hardest to get accurate, because you have nothing to work off of. You don't have a history. But as you go through your business, every day you want to take detailed notes. Write down how many covers you actually did at lunch, at dinner, at breakfast, whatever your service times might be. Write down what your average sale was. Write down what's going on in the community. Was it raining or snowing or bright and sunny out? Those things affect how many people go out to eat. Also, if there's a big event, a festival, some music thing going on in your town, that's going to draw people in, and it'll mess up your numbers if it's not the same the following year. So you want to make sure you're taking as detailed notes as you can every day that you're in business, because next year you can look back and see you served 300 people today and your average ticket price was $11.50. So it becomes a lot easier to be more accurate, because you can look at exactly what you did this same day of this same week of this same month last year. It becomes a lot more accurate as you go through. So do you guys have any questions about that? Nope. Assuming I can work my computer. No? Nothing, huh? All right, well, I guess I will, I'll move on here. Or maybe I won't if I can't share my screen. Oh, Paul, go ahead.
Yes, how do you do it for a food truck, since there is no seat?
Food trucks are tricky. If you're really lucky, you'll have some other food truck owners in town that you can talk to, and they'll be willing to share that information. If not, usually for big events, like a lot of times you'll see food trucks at festivals and things. Most of the time, those events, when they've been running for a while, can give you as a business owner some idea about how many other food trucks are going to be there and how many people are going to be at the festival. And so you can kind of get a vague idea of how many people you can serve in a day using that information that you can get from the festival organizers. Does that make sense?
Yes.
And remember also, on a food truck, you will have a point of sale system. So you'll either have a cash register that prints out receipts, or you'll have an iPad. You'll have a computer system, kind of like Micros. That's more for a restaurant, but will have a point of sale system. So if you had just manual with receipts, you could keep all of the yellows, and you would be able to count your covers and still calculate your average prices, even on a food truck.
Okay.
Chef, you have one more question?
Go ahead, Rhea.
For you?
I was going to say something what Chef Gregory was saying, that I was going to get even more basic though. You know, the thing that's like the clicker, and when that they used to use years ago, I don't know if they still use it, but I would say if I had a food truck, I would have my clicker, and every time that, you know, the person that would be doing the money would do the transaction, they'd hit the clicker, because by noontime, we would see that we had 30 people so far today, just already, without even having to go into the computer or the point of sale thing to see what your revenue was so far up until that point.
No, that's a great way to do that. You just want to make sure, like if you were checking in at lunch and you opened at 10 and your lunch closed at 1, for an example, you would document still your lunch time.
Right. Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, now that I've figured out my computer, um, so we just talked about this middle piece, that revenue. So first up in costs, we're going to talk about this cost of goods sold. So 30% cost of goods. This is, again, a guideline. It's not set in stone. Some businesses are going to run at 18% food cost. If you're a bakery, you could be really low on food cost. But a concept like a bakery is going to balance that out in labor, because the ingredients are super cheap, but a lot of labor goes into making all those products. So your business is going to be slightly different. Within that cost of goods, like we were saying earlier, there's a lot of different categories that might be here. Food, beverage, and retail as three general categories are pretty typical for restaurants, for food service concepts in general. And each one of these is going to have a different goal percentage, but we want these to really add up, average out to be that 30%. You might be selling your beer at a 10% cost of goods, but your retail might be at 50% and your food cost at 30%. You just want to make sure that overall it averages out to be that 30% or near to it, whatever your goal is for this category. Is your concept going to be mostly scratch-made products? If it's all scratch, raw ingredients tend to be pretty cheap compared to pre-made products. When you're buying pre-made products, you're paying someone else to do all the prep work and get it ready to go. When you're doing it in-house, you don't have to pay that labor that they're spending. So usually with a scratch kitchen, you're going to have a little lower food cost, but a little higher labor cost. And vice versa with pre-made products. If you're going to be selling all pre-made corn dogs and that's all you sell, you might have very, very low labor costs, but very high food costs. The hope is that those will balance out to be 30%. So pre-made typically is going to be closer to 30 to 35% if you're leaning towards that pre-made side of things. And scratch, you're usually not going to go too far below 25%. I've seen it done and done well at as low as 23% for a restaurant, but it's unusual and it takes very careful consideration. So the first step when you're trying to budget for your food costs is to create your menu. Figure out what you're actually going to have in your menu, and don't just put food on there. Make sure you're including your soda. Make sure you're including bottled beverages if you're going to have any of those. If you're going to have retail, that should be on there too. And as you're creating this menu, you're going to include each and every ingredient that goes into those dishes. By getting that running list of every single ingredient, you're going to actually build your inventory list. And then once you have a complete inventory list, you get to have some fun because you get to shop around. There are some really fantastic resources out there that will help you to find price points for different ingredients for different products. Personally, I love food shows, vendor shows. Usually they will have these at least once a year in your area for the big broadliners. And they can be great places because they have a wide variety of their products and prices out on view. You can also do research online. You can call up the company and talk to a sales rep. There's a lot of different ways to, excuse me. There's a lot of different ways to find prices and really shop around. And it can be really fun or it can be tedious depending on how you approach it. So you want to approach it from a fun perspective, if you're me anyway. Do you guys have any questions about food costs or cost of goods sold? No? One thing about this particular category, it usually is not spelled out in full words. It's usually COGS. So if you see COGS, chances are it's talking about cost of goods sold. All right, well, if there's no questions, I'll just keep on cranking on here. So we just talked about our cost of goods sold. We're going to move over here to labor costs. So again, I'm going to say this a lot because I really want this to be the takeaway. This is a guideline, and your business is going to be different. Your business is probably not going to run exactly at 30% labor cost. Personally, I like to start with management when I'm building my budget for a new business. Management have the highest skill level. They're usually on salary, so that's a fixed cost for me. And they're the hardest people to get to hire because they need to have the most skill. They need to have the most knowledge. They need to have the right personality for your concept and your business. They need to actually agree with your business and your mission statement, because if they don't agree with it, they're not going to be able to effectively lead your staff. So this is the person or people that I like to start with when I'm looking at a new concept, because they are the hardest. Once I have them in place, it gets easier and easier as I move into less skilled, lower paid positions. While you're doing that, you want to create a budget for each of these positions. You kind of did this on last week's assignment with that labor schedule, where you put in a pay rate for each of those positions. But when you're creating your budget, you want to get a little more detailed than we did with last week. You want to do a ton of research. You want to find out how much other people are paying their dishwashers. Because if you are paying your dishwasher $8 an hour and every other restaurant in town is paying their dishwasher $10 an hour, guess what's going to happen the next time a position opens up for a dishwasher in town? They are out of there and you won't even know what hit you. You'll be just without a dishwasher one night. It's terrible. So you want to be competitive, and that requires research. One way that I like to do this kind of research is looking at job postings. Craigslist, internal job sites. I just look online at as many saute cook positions as I can, as many sous chef positions as I can that are in my city, in my state even, and I make sure that I'm in line with what everybody else is paying, or even a little higher if I can afford it. By doing that, right off the bat, before I have a chance to win them over with my wonderful personality and management style, they're already wanting to stay here because they're getting paid more than they might at other places. That culture, that atmosphere is incredibly important to keeping your people around. But at the beginning, with those first impressions, a little bit higher pay can go a long way. So like I was saying before, scratch kitchens are going to have a little higher labor cost to balance out that lower food cost. Pre-made kitchens are going to be a little lower on labor cost and a little higher on food cost. So, any questions about that? I see some heads shaking. We're good. All right. There we go. Go ahead, Tammy.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to do when I was doing my scheduling, that I looked up because I did mine from Australia, right? So I looked up what is the average salary, and that's where I went with my salaries and my per hours.
Gotcha. That's a great way of trying to figure out rate of pay is looking up. For instance, we have the labor board. Usually other countries are going to have something similar that will help you. They have wonderful statistics, and like Chef Rachel was saying, I too love statistics. They help me. They make my life easier. So even though I hate looking at numbers, I love looking at numbers at the same time. Finding the right resources for wherever you're going to go, Australia for you, Tammy, is a great idea.
But
And
also remember to do that conversion, because remember, you're seeing that salary in Australian dollars, which is different than US dollars. So when I don't know what it's looking right, the conversion rate is now, but I made more money in Australia because I think when I was living there, the US dollar was stronger than the Australian dollar. So just remember those conversion rates when you're looking at that too.
Thank you. And that homework assignment is not as bad as you might think. We'll get there, I promise. So next up, we're going to be talking about these operating costs, which is basically everything that's not cost of goods sold or labor costs. So these might change business to business a little bit. But in general, you're going to have the same basic idea. So now I'm going to have to ask you guys to actually speak up, and I know that's terrible. But what would I put in operating costs? What are some typical things?
Rent?
Rent. That's huge. Thank you. What else?
Utilities.
Utilities. What else?
Advertisement.
Marketing. Yes, I love it.
Fuel.
Plate settings and stuff.
Fuel.
Fuel? Yeah. If you're a food truck, your gas would be in operating costs. Yeah. So.
Food.
Sorry, I didn't quite catch that last one.
I said, wouldn't the food be part of operating costs also?
Nope, because we're going to put food in cost of goods sold. So food cost is up in, because that's one of the things we're selling. We're buying the food and then we're going to sell that food, right?
Okay.
Operating costs are things that we're not actually going to sell.
Okay, well, would it be operating costs if, say, for instance, I know that if you have a food truck and you don't have a kitchen, you have to go to, I forgot what the word or the phrase was, when you would have to go like rent out a kitchen to prepare your food for the food truck. Would that go under that then?
Yeah, your rent for your commissary kitchen would be an operating cost.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah, so, oh, go ahead, Tammy.
Did we say Wi-Fi?
Wi-Fi would be a big one. Yes, that's definitely an operating cost. So when I'm looking at, excuse me, at these operating costs, another thing is cable. Are you going to be a sports bar? Then you better think about how much that cable is going to cost you to get all those games going, right?
Can I make one note about cable?
Please.
Or satellite. When you have cable or satellite in your business, it's not like at home where you pay like $79 a month and then you add on your own channels. They actually a lot of times contract it out because it's a business. They'll charge you per seat. They'll charge you a certain amount of money per seat. So your cable bill is very, very important because it's going to be way higher than you think. And if you'd like to do like a pay-per-view event for like boxing, for an example, you actually get charged the fee plus then per seat. So just something to think about for cable in the future.
That's awesome. Thank you, Chef. I kind of lost track of things. Oh, right. Making a budget. So your first step is you want to try and list out as many of these operating costs as you can. And every time you think of something, do some research on that specifically. Try and find out what rent is going to look like for a restaurant in your area that's roughly the same size as your goal, your restaurant that you envision. Look at how much cable is going to be. Look at how much utilities typically are for that type of a space. You can find this information out there. That research is really important and it will really help you to get your budget pulled together if you go into it with these costs in mind. I think Tammy might have just raised her hand.
Yeah, Chef.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I said, what about repairs? The cost of repairs, you have to call somebody to come in and fix the plumbing, or something like that.
Yep, those would definitely be operating costs as well.
You have one more, Chef?
Go ahead, Ria.
Yes, and also when you say that, would it be beneficial for us, like, to contact the realtors in the area that are for commercial,
Yes.
and ask them in the particular? Because I'm having a hard time trying to figure this out, because right now I know I don't have money to open up a business, but I know what I want. So only thing that I can do is look at the area where I would like to have it, and then contact a realtor and say, how much would the average amount be for, a monthly leasing? Or do they do it by the year? Do they do it 6 months, 2 years, 3 years? Because I know some places you have to lease it for 3 years or 2 years. So that, oh wow, 5
years, 10 years. These are not uncommon numbers.
So that has a lot to do with where you want to go.
That's absolutely true. And talking to a realtor who specializes in restaurants specifically can be tremendously helpful.
Yes.
So once you have that detailed list of all your costs, shop around as much as you can. This particular category is probably the hardest to make meaningful impact on after you open. Can anybody tell me why?
Competition?
Competition can have an impact, but what's bigger is when you rent an apartment, what's the first thing you do before you move in?
Do a walkthrough.
You do a walkthrough? Do you sign anything?
Yeah.
Yep.
Sign a lease, make sure it's clean.
Yep. You're stuck with a lease or a mortgage if you're going to buy the building. You're stuck with a contract if you're on a commercial cable. There are big issues if you try and get out of these things early, and it's very expensive and it's very costly. And so once you're in a lease, once you're in a contract, you're kind of stuck with it. So usually this is going to be the hardest category to make meaningful impact on. So that's kind of operating costs in a nutshell. Finally, we're going to talk about this 10% profit here. This is an ideal. Do you guys remember from the beginning of this presentation how much most restaurants make in profit?
23% to 25?
You just added 20 to it.
3 to 5%.
3 to 5, that's right.
Yep.
I'm thinking about the other thing, yeah.
Yep. 3 to 5% is typical for a profitable restaurant. A lot of restaurants are not profitable, so just something to keep in mind there. This is a percentage of your sales. Remember, that's 10% of your sales, or all those costs were 30% of your sales. So make sure you're keeping that in mind. When you're looking at your sales, you want to categorize them. Just like you broke out your cost of goods sold, you want to break out your sales. So instead of saying, my sales were $10,000 for this week, I want to break it out into different categories. I sold $4,000 in food this week. I sold $3,000 in beverages. Maybe I have another separate category for non-alcoholic beverages because they're so much different from my alcoholic beverages. Maybe if I'm running a catering company out of my kitchen, I have those costs separate, those sales separate as well. So you want to have your sales all broken out into these categories so that you can directly see the relationship between how much you're spending on these items and how much you're bringing in for them. Quick question for you guys. If you make 10% profit, is that going to go into your pocket if you're the owner? I see what I love to see, a lot of head shaking. Why not?
Doesn't it go back into keeping everything running?
You're going to want to reinvest in the business. That's absolutely right. You guys were asking about equipment repairs a little bit earlier. What happens if your business has no money of its own in the bank and your grill dies? What do you, the owner, get to do?
Not get paid.
You get to not get paid. It comes out of your own money. But if the business has its own bank account and you are setting money aside every day, every week, every month, and building up this nice, healthy safety fund, then when something happens, you've got money to cover that. If you're building floods, hopefully you have flood insurance. However, that takes time to get reimbursed for that. So in the meantime, you got to spend your own money or your business's money to get that flood damage cleaned up. And then eventually you get reimbursed by the insurance company, hopefully. But if you don't have any money, you could end up just shuttering the business. So it's really important you have money set aside for those things. You also want that money set aside for plates and glasses and ramekins, because ramekins go missing to who knows where so often I can't even tell you. I turn around and I've lost 100 ramekins like once a week. It's insane. So
I would like to make a comment on that.
Go ahead.
I'm guilty, like sometimes when we go to places like Red Lobster or whatever, and they'll have like little ramekins full of sauce, and then they'll bring you out a to-go container. I have just like put it in the box, and I didn't do it intentionally, but it would be like it's already in something and it's not going to spill, so I just put it in the box, and when I get home, I'll be like, "Oh my God, I just took one of their little glass dishes."
Case in point, Tracy. Case in point.
Yeah, I'm sorry about that. So sorry. I'm not a thief, or at least I'm not trying to be. I'm so sorry.
Chef, we also have candle holders and espresso spoon in the chat too.
It just breaks my heart. As a business owner, you're going to find out that these things are not uncommon at all. Anything small is going to go.
Silverware. Always in the garbage. Always. We used to have to double check the garbage after every service because people would seem like they would just take their throw it in the garbage, and I'm like, why would you do that?
Buy magnetic silverware and a big magnet to go around your trash can.
Oh, okay.
Sticks to the side anytime somebody tries to throw out their silverware. Well, I learned that one the hard way. So, all right, guys, we are running out of time, and I want to talk about this assignment. So let's talk about the profit and loss sheet. P&L, that's what that stands for, profit and loss. It is very simply a statement of how well your business is doing. It tells you exactly how much you did in sales. It tells you exactly how much you spent. So reading a profit and loss sheet is a skill like anything else. Most people don't pick up a guitar on day one and rock out some Hendrix. However, if they work really, really, really hard at it and keep on doing it, they get good at it. Same thing with a P&L. It takes practice. It takes time to get really good at picking out the information that you're looking for. So that being said, again, this is just a statement of what is going on with your business. So for when you're looking at it, the top portion is going to be revenue. That's money coming in, sales. Below that is going to be your costs. And it's all going to be broken out into categories. And I'm going to show you that in a moment. Remember, especially for this assignment, we are looking for that 30, 30, 30, 10 model. So anything that's over 30% cost, that's too high, and that's one of your problems that you can identify. At the very bottom is your total. The P&L sheet takes all your sales, subtracts all your costs, and gives you a total. That is why they call it the bottom line, is because it is quite literally the bottom line on a profit and loss sheet. It tells you, I made $600 this week, or it tells you, I spent $2,000 more than I made. That's sad. So if that bottom line is negative, you're losing money. My way of reading it is I start with that bottom line and I look at the overall picture. Am I making money or losing money? And then I start to dig in to each category and I do the same thing. I start at the bottom line. How much did I spend on my operating costs? How much did I spend on my total cost of goods sold? How much money did I make? And then I drill into the details. How much did I spend on rent or food or wine? By doing that way, you kind of go from the big picture and you drill down to a little more detail with each step. This is your assignment. That's it. You got a bunch of numbers. This is a P&L over here. And at the top, like I said, you've got your revenue. And then all these numbers are your costs. And then if that little menu will go away, right above, right on the bottom, there is your net profit and loss. That tells you if you lost money, if you made money, or if it's zero. What does that mean, guys?
Broke even.
You broke even?
Yep, you got it. You broke even. So you're answering a few questions about each of these businesses. Number one, identify 2 cost problems using these numbers over here. And then for each of those problems, you're going to offer me some solutions. Tell me how to fix those problems. So I want to see 2 solutions for each problem that you identify. So that's 2 problems from a cost perspective and 4 total solutions. So if I can do this. So here we go. Like I said, I like to start at the bottom and get the big picture. Net profit and loss, $0. This company broke even. I have a problem with that because that's not 10%. Now, guys, this is just a summary of the business. This is not a cost problem. You can't use the net profit and loss line as a cost problem. That's not going to be one of your answers. However, these category totals could be. If you look at these category totals, you always compare them to your revenue. So remember, the 100% is this number here, your total revenue, your money coming in. Each of these is hopefully at 30% or lower. Now, I'm going to tell you how to do the math, but I'm also going to say this. If you can look at these numbers and see that, hey, you know, $2,500, that's almost half of $5,500. That's a problem. That's over 30%. If you can do that, that's okay for this assignment, but you better be right. And the math will give weight to your answers. It will help you to sell those as the problems you're identifying and help you to understand this a little bit better. So the way to figure out your cost percentages is you take that cost and you divide it by the sales. So if we take that labor cost and we divide it by our revenue, 5560, we find out that we're sitting at a 46% labor cost. That's way through the roof. That's a huge problem. So that's somewhere that we're going to want to focus. So once we've got a handle on these category totals, then you want to dig into the details. Look at each line individually and see if something is really jumping out at you as being too high. So with cost of goods sold, you have a direct relationship with your revenue because you can look at food sales and you can look at food costs. So again, you'll just take your cost and divide it by your sale. And you can do that for each one of these individually. And you can see if one of these categories of costs isn't quite where it's supposed to be, even though overall my cost of goods sold looks good, one of these might not be good. So looking at this, can you guys spot which one of these isn't quite right?
The wine.
Wine, you got it. So again, costs are on the bottom. So we're spending $600 on wine. And we're selling that $600 of wine for $200. That means we're operating at a $400 loss on wine. And that's before looking at labor, that's before looking at operating costs, anything else that goes into serving up that wine. So that's a huge problem and something you're definitely going to want to address. So when you recognize that problem, try and think of what could cause that. So what could cause that kind of a problem for me, guys?
Not getting your product from the right company.
Yeah, maybe you're getting overcharged for wine. That could be a problem. What else?
Selling it too cheap.
Your menu price could be a problem. I see stealing and theft in the chat over here. That could be a huge problem and a common one with alcohol.
Buying too much for the amount of people you got.
Too much for your volume. Maybe you broke a whole case of wine. That would cause something like that. Another thing to look at is human error. Maybe whoever punched in these numbers punched them in wrong. So one of the things that I look at is if I take that $600 and I divide it by where I know it should be, 0.30, 30%, we see that our sales should be at $2,000. That's only 1 zero off. There are 4 zeros here. Maybe I just forgot to hit that extra zero.
Or you could be sick like me. I'm sick, I'm tired, I'm looking, everything's looking a little blurry. Can't tell what the little period is. Mm-hmm. That happens, right? Right, Chef Greg?
Yes, ma'am, it does.
So we've thought up a whole bunch of explanations for these numbers. Human error, theft, overordering, breakage or spoilage, being overcharged by your vendor. So now our next step is to offer a solution. If I said my problem was theft, and that's why my wine was too high, what is a possible solution to a theft problem?
Checking out your employees to make sure that they're serving appropriately, because they could be, not serving. They could be, the measurements is off, so they're using more for a drink than what is the standard type,
Overpouring is a huge issue, and it's a very common problem. I see in the chat, lock it up. That's definitely a good thing, except when you're in service, you can't really have your wine locked up. Doing inventory, huge help. Having cameras in your front of house is important. It not only watches your employees and makes sure that they're not just pocketing a bottle of wine, which I would be impressed if they put it in their pocket, but it also makes sure that your employees are in a safe environment. There's always some video record of what's happening in your front of house area. So if there's an unruly guest, you can point to the cameras. It covers you, it covers your staff, it covers your guests. Everybody is in a better place when you have cameras watching your front of house. I cannot recommend that strongly enough. Daily inventory is fantastic if you have the time and patience for it. Some people do, some people don't. But it is a great thing. So
I was about to say that a sign-in chart and a sign-out chart So then that way you know that if she got 3 bottles of wine today and you're 4 bottles of wine short, then you'll know almost where to pinpoint it at.
Right. So one more quick thing before I stop the screen share. At the bottom, there are 3 tabs. If you remember back on your costing sheets, there were, I think, 5 tabs. You want to fill out all 3 tabs. There are different businesses on each one. So you're going to have to do this same thing for 3 different businesses. We just walked through Janet's catering company. We identified 2 cost problems. We identified 1 solution to those cost problems. So you're on your own for the other 3. But you're going to have to do that same thing for Jamie's Waffle Wagon and for Poor John's Pub. And then once you've looked at all 3 of them, that's when you're going to look at this second question here. Which business has the most potential to be profitable and why? There's no right or wrong answer to that. All 3 of these businesses have great potential to profit. So I'm looking for you and your thoughts on which one of these has the most potential. Do you guys have any questions on this assignment? Yep, go ahead, Nadine.
So the second part, the second question is just, we only have to answer that one once because that's about all 3.
Correct, yep.
Okay.
And you guys can type this all right on these sheets in the extra cells. You can type your answers there. You can type your answers where you would normally put a link. You can type them in a Google document. As long as we can see and read it. Handwriting, not so much, but as long as it's computer letters, we should be good. Any other questions about the assignment or anything we talked about tonight?
See, I said it was a big assignment.
It takes some time. I would highly recommend submitting early because then you have more opportunities to resubmit. You get feedback and you can go back in and resubmit it as many times as you need to get where you want to be with this assignment. So the earlier you get it in, the greater your chance to understand this material.
And everybody, a P&L statement is something you're going to hear massively through your entire career. I would say my entire executive career was just based off a P&L statement. I was spoiled and I had an accountant generate mine every day. However, just some motivation for you, my bonus per year was I was able to get up to 20% of my salary per bonus, which is a lot of money. It's a great thing to shoot for, right? But 5% was labor cost, 5% was food costs, 5% was other costs, and 5% was sales. So if I didn't meet any of those numbers, it just kept dropping and dropping and dropping my bonus. So I pretty much lived by the P&L every single day. It is something that's super, super, super important. And the further and further and the more you get in your career, the more and more you'll hear about it. It does take a second, like Chef said, to practice it. However, it is extremely, extremely important. That's it.
All right. If there aren't any more questions. Oh, Rhea, go ahead.
You're going to have that slideshow that you just did?
Yep, I actually already put it on the class page. It's right below where the archive will be tomorrow morning. But it is on the class page already. I just called it slides from the live session, I think.
Okay, yeah, so we can review it and go back to the other course to look at that stuff again. Because you want us to do the math, right?
The math will help you get exact numbers. Again, if you can see that a number is really not right, that's okay. You don't have to do the math, but I would recommend the practice. It's good math to know. Cost divided by revenue.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'm gonna do that. Okay.
All right, guys. Well,
Okay.
We are good to go. Let me get my, hold on. Now I'm going to get my little thing. So you guys remember, do you guys remember what we're doing? When's your assignment due?
Good night.
Tuesday, 11:59. When's your discussion due?
Saturday.
Saturday at 11:59 p.m. Central Standard Time with 2 peer responses. 2 by Tuesday, 11:59. Look at that. She's running to get that discussion and assignment done, just like how you guys are, right? Yes, Chef. It's going to be awesome. Oh, I'm so glad to hear that. Oh, yay. So I hope everybody has a great night and a great, great week, rest of your week, and we will see everybody next week.
Okay, thank you.
Goodbye.
Feel better.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.